And we're back in. It's another podcast episode of Raging with Ron and Riccardo. And our very special guest on this podcast is Jackie Rhinehart, the author of My Organic Soul. Good evening, Jackie. How are you?
Hi, glad to be here. I'm good, thank you.
Great to have you. Now, tell us a little bit about your background and what we're going to be talking about tonight, what your passion is that we're going to be expanding on.
I have spent over 35, 40 years in the music business. I started out in the 80s, 1979. My first client doing merchandising and t-shirts was Rick James, baby. Rick James, Prince, Pieces of a Dream, Zap, More Bounce to the Ounce. That was my beginning. I went on to become the director of the Governor's Mansion in South Carolina, but I had my little side business going. And then I came in to New York City and worked and finally found myself at a record company at Arista Records as director of publicity. And I went on from there to Mercury, to Uptown handling Mary J. Blige, back to Arista handling LaFace, as well as Bad Boy and Master P and all of the artists. And then over to Universal where I became head of marketing. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed one step. I was at Mercury where I was the head of marketing and took on a lot of artists there. Of course, Tony, Black Sheep, Vanessa Williams, Brian McKnight, Oleta Adams, etc. And then over to Universal Records where I spent the last part of my career. And that was everybody from its inception till now. Those are the artists that I've worked.
Honored to have you here, Jackie.
All right, glad to be here. My book primarily is a mashup of my loves, okay? My Organic Soul.
My Organic
Plato
Soul.
to Creflo, Emerson to MLK, Jesus to Jay-Z. It's quotes and aphorisms that I've collected over the years, but many of them spurred up by my associations in the music industry. Lyrics being one of the basis, and I've worked with some who are just awesome at that, be it Rakim or Erykah Badu, and they're quoted in the book as well. But I've looked at that from another standpoint, is that I attended a school in New York City, the School of Practical Philosophy. And the School of Practical Philosophy was basically about awareness, cultivating awareness, and being present in life. And so meditation was a part of that, but also the readings of Marcus Aurelius, the Bhagavad Gita, the Bible, sacred works. And we would talk about them and their impact and practical applications in our lives. So it was a wonderful opportunity to just explore, and I attended there for years. And this was this preceded, I guess, really almost by 15 years. The whole it's not just a trend. I do think that it's solid and it's authentic, but of course there are a lot of people that are now a part of meditation and realizing the value of that and awareness and cultivating practical philosophy. Heck, Google does a school of practical philosophy. It's called Search Within. But at any rate, I took those things and I melded them, and then I realized, a lot of the things that we hold as our own philosophies and our thoughts are really things that we've cultivated or culled from others. A lot of it being lyrics, things that just come across that way, as well as the things that you've heard and latched onto in life. So I wanted that to be unpacked. And as I said in the book, I don't trust people who don't talk to themselves. So you kind of need to take that time to hear what you're saying to yourself. And it may even be the ruminations of things that are pieces of philosophy or music that we just, take on and not really pay attention to. So that's the premises of the book, in terms of I wanted it to cultivate that type of awareness in people, to just take the time and journal. And Iyanla Vanzant was a book that I liked a lot. And she had pages for daily meditation, but she had no way for you to write in the book and respond to what would come up in your own meditations. And I left that opening in my book, so it becomes your own book.
And Jackie, as I was looking through it and spending some time with it, you left a lot of space for people to write their own thoughts. And you made a point in the preface of the book to say, look, don't censor yourself, and censorship in general don't do, but don't censor yourself. Write down your thoughts, put it on paper, get it out in front of people, and let yourself be free with it. I think now today, with all the things that are going on, which is one of the reasons that Riccardo and I kind of decided, and you and I spoke about you being so kind to join us on this podcast, we decided to do this to start to get in front of people with different mindsets, some disagreements, some agreements, some completely foreign thoughts that maybe none of us considered, right? To be able to have an exchange for hopefully when people watch this and people look at you and I and Riccardo and the other guests we have on the show, they'll start to think and they'll start to let themselves be a little bit free and search for the truth, regardless of what you say or I say or Riccardo says or whoever else says or what the TV says or anybody else. You got to dig down deep inside yourself to find your own truth. And sometimes our truths are a little bit different, right?
Yep. And that's one of the things that I think happens when you write. You get to see your thoughts, so that way you really can go back. And let me go back and unpack that one more time. Is that what I think? Or is that what I said? Because oftentimes you don't know, you act upon things without actually articulating them. You understand what I'm saying? Have you ever stopped someone cold in their tracks and ask them, is that really what you want to do? And say it out loud, what it is they're about to contemplate or do. And then they step back and say, well, no. But yet you were in that motion. That's what you were going for. That's what would have happened. But you aren't stopping to question and think for yourself. So that's one of the things that writing allows you to do long form. It allows you to see what it is that you think and perfect it, actually. Because you can take your ideas and just like a writer, now refine it.
Right. Yeah, I thought maybe, writing it down for me was always for recall, right? I wanted to make sure I remembered. But you're right. Once you go back and look at it and start to read it, you process it a bit differently because maybe some of your experiences have changed even in the couple of moments when you wrote it and read it, right?
Yep.
It's a great way to organize your mind, isn't it? It's a great way to put your mind straight, if you like.
Yes. Because I think a lot of times people operate without really know their own operating system.
It reminded me, actually, speaking of lyrics, there's an Australian band that I love called The Cruel Sea. And they had a song called Brainwash. And the lyrics to that are, living in the back of my mind, there's a wild idea. I just took a look around at all the shit in here. My mind is flooded like someone's attic. Before I burn this house down, I better fix it up quick. I think I need a brainwash.
Wow. There you go. Yep, exactly.
So, we were talking a little bit before we went live here, too, a little bit about some of the unrest and about the music business, that you and I and Riccardo have a very common thread all through it for a long time. We've made it our life to be involved in music, which has been a blessing, I think, certainly has for me.
Yeah, me too.
But we were talking about the term urban seems to be like, now with, the unrest, they said, okay, we're not going to, at least one record label out there said, we're not going to use the term urban music anymore, right? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I never liked the term. I didn't like the line of demarcation that when to say that, for example, that you are director or vice president of urban or Black publicity, but yet you're also working projects and music that goes beyond the genres. And now it's not that it would be one thing if it had been labeled as a genre, for example, of R&B music or country music, or if we make those specifications in each genre of music. But this was more, to me, I said it's an evolution, but I don't begrudge the origin of the title because I know it came in a time when you were actually having to carve out your place in the music business. Because you know what I realized, Rob? That I am the second generation of the first Blacks in the music industry. The people that were right before me, uh, 10, 15, 20 years before me, that would have been my mentors, such as like Mike Bernardo. Did you ever meet Mike Bernardo?
I did not.
Okay, but you know who she was? Mike Bernardo was, by the time you may have known her, she was managing John Lucien and so forth. But before that, she was the head of national urban or black music at Columbia Sony. And that was in the early 70s. Now, so the people who were in the music business in the 70s were the first black people in the music business.
Look how far we've come.
I know, but that's lying, because we know there was black music before those executives, right? But when Miles Davis and Wes Montgomery and George, you know, you look at their album covers and they had no inkling that they were black, even in terms of, as a matter of fact, that was something that was put on the music, because we're coming out of a period that, although the music itself is popular, it's called race music, right?
Yeah.
So now when those artists were in their heyday, and I'm talking about, you know, the Dizzy Gillespie. I mean, I've hung out with Dizzy back in my day, you know,
nice.
In 1979, smoked a joint with him. But in his time, the record labels that he was on would not have had anybody like me working anything. I don't care if he's black. Miles Davis, you didn't have anybody black working your record. There was no black publicist or radio promotion. So the industry itself created the need or the demand for it to be a black executive. You saw the movie James Brown, when James Brown told that radio station that there better be a black man there. So once there was black radio stations and we expected to be serviced by black promotion people, then there was a need to hire black promotion people. So that's how they got in the game, okay? Now, when they got in the game, they're the first prong, the first defense line, the black radio promotion man, Tony Anderson. Now, when they come through, you know, the Paris Ely's and all of those of the day, they now make room for other media platforms, and there come magazines like Regina Jones out in LA, where she had her magazine. She told the record company, how come you don't have any black publicists calling me about Sly and the Family Stone? What's going on here? What? And so when the media demanded that there be an interface with the label that was black, then they started looking for black publicists. So eventually the departments grew. You got black marketing people, probably were the last rung. But as I was saying, Mike Bernardo, somebody we knew in our time, was the first black national promotion person.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting, Jackie, we talked a little bit about this before too. Riccardo, I'll bring you kind of up to speed. I have a deep-rooted belief long before now that we shouldn't identify in categories of people in America. I think we should just be identified as a person. And I'll tell you why I think that. I came up, Jackie, in black music as a white man, and all of a sudden I had artists that were coming in, and I'm the blue-eyed devil, right? And then I would go to corporate America to sell music to the big chain stores, and they would call me a smut merchant. So I was sitting on this island, right? Trying to figure out how I fit in and trying to truly understand black culture, right? Truly understand it, because you can think you know it, you can think, and it doesn't matter whether it's black, French, New Zealand, whatever. We all have our uniqueness about the cultures that we come from, be it Southern America or Midwestern America or Northern, you know, whatever that is, and trying to figure that out. And now we're getting closer. I'm always optimistic. I'm not a negative person at the core. And I believe that we're advancing and we're getting better. We have a lot of people out there that think we're not and that we're going in the wrong direction. That's fine. I'm very positive that, you know, hopefully my children will grow up in a place that starts to live out Martin Luther King's words, right? Where we don't identify people you know, as unique other than people.
Well, you know, Ron, I think that's why we love the music industry, because in that space, that's where we really do dig and get into each other like, oh man, I love you, man. And we do it over the music, like no joke, for real. That's why when you meet black people, I said, I remember having a conversation with Nelson George. I said, you know, I've never met a white person to tell me that they love Tina Marie. Like the way black people say, I love Tina Marie. But the point is that we meet over the culture, because Tina Marie loved R&B. She was R&B. As a matter of fact, I don't think she ever even toured with anybody other than black acts. But the point of it was, that's the earnestness, that's the authenticity, and it's not questioned. And I think in your position, that was the level of acceptance culturally, was that people knew you were real to this. You understand? So that's all that you can really ask for. It's like this. I met oh gosh, the saxophonist. I got to remember his name. It'll come to me. But he is so good. And my mother would not believe jazz saxophonist. She said, I don't believe he's black. I mean, that he's white. When I met him, I told him, I said, you know, my mama doesn't believe that you're white. She just swears you're black. But that's what the music comes across. He's a soul brother. You understand what I'm saying? So I just think that that's the great part about music, that we really relate to each other from that place. So, you know, that's what music does. That's what it does all around the world. That's why it is what it is. It's the language of God. I mean, it really is, because you feel it and understand it oftentimes without even knowing the words. And then the fact that you can have that type of relationship with something, I understand why it's used as a cultural ambassador, and thank God for it. I mean, really.
I was under the impression that music was colorblind, you know, and I take things like acts like Charlie Pride, who was a black man doing his thing in what is predominantly a white world, a living color, you know, the same thing, or in reverse that and put, say, Eminem, you know, in the hip hop world. I mean, if you can't categorize, I don't think, a music style by just calling it by its color, can you? Because there are so many. It'd be like saying, this is this guy is going to promote all our white music, and that could be everything from heavy metal to country and western to folk to opera.
Yeah. Let me ask you something. It's interesting, Riccardo, what you're saying, and I'm curious, honestly, because in America, where Jackie and I are, right, we tend to get a little bit siloed and a little focused on our own country, right, because we're a long ways away from you. In New Zealand, with Kiwis, do you know, segregate the music out?
Well, we do from a radio point of view, but that's a genre thing. You know, and the word urban is used, but it's only used because we look at the American charts for reference. So, you know, you want to know what the next big thing is, you look at the Billboard chart. And so you look, if you're, you know, one of our big stations here is My FM, and they very much the R&B station. So they get categorized as, I guess you'd say, urban, because they look at the urban charts from the States to see what's big in the States before it comes out to New Zealand. So there is that about it, but it's probably not as segregated as what it is in the US. It's the lines aren't as hard and fast.
Well, you know, Ron, back to what I'm saying, it's an evolution. It started it was race, then rhythm and blues, where it really could go back to, then black, and then urban. So, you know, but I don't prefer the terms. I think that the evolution is not complete until we get to the point where we can just not have those as designated titles on your business card. There's no need to make that differentiation. If you're the head of marketing at Universal, you're just the head of marketing. You don't have to be the head of black marketing. I mean, what is that? You know what I'm saying? You're using the same billboards in Times Square as anybody else. What are you telling me? So that distinction is not necessary. It's an evolution. And as I say, I also think, now, you know, but get this, there's pushback. And the pushback comes from black executives and those that are in the industry that feel as though, well, what will that leave us? Will my position in this behemoth be secure? If you strip away that, then I can just be flowed out with the mainstream and not left here. So how do I secure my piece of the rock if there's not a designation that says I'm supposed to be here, urban black?
Right, and some of that, Jackie, as you're well aware, is part of control too, right? Because if I'm sitting at the top of black music and I'm a black man, right, I can kind of build my little wall and say, hey, you know, this is my, this is my people, and I can, you know, y'all don't understand what I'm doing, so, you know, stay over there and do what you do. And
I got my budgets, I got my people, and see, at one point in time, as I said, well, considering that you didn't have anybody black in the business, I can understand how it went to a point where it said, well, give them a piece of the rock. And then go ahead, you know what, this is going well. And look, by the 80s, Ron, it was going well. Look at all of the groups and all of the bands. Give them a piece, give them a piece. You know, Capitol Records said, Charles Huggins, what you want? I mean, give them a piece. So that happened. And then remember, even inside of the labels, you got to even create your own imprint. You know, remember there was Cotillion under at Atlantic for Henry Allen, right? So that, I mean, and recently that was given to Sylvia Rohn over at Epic. What was hers? This is or whatever. So my point is, they were given their vanity labels, they had their own staff and so forth. And that's a makeup for the fact that you weren't involved for decades prior. Because like I said, it's not like you came in with the advent of black music. Black music was already there. There were stars there and no black hands had ever touched them. So now, yes, you now making up for that. But I think that it's not over. The pendulum has to go so that when Ed Eckstein comes in and he becomes head of not only the division that has Tony and Vanessa Williams and, you know, Brian McKnight and Black Sheep, but he also is overseeing John Cougar Mellencamp and Bon Jovi, and there shouldn't be any resentment of that. But boy, you know, there was a lot of resentment, wasn't it, Ron?
Oh yeah, it's amazing, you know. And you touched on something that's really interesting that I think needs to be said. It's all about the almighty dollar at the end of the day. And so, you know, when you look at rap in the mid to late 80s to the early 90s, where it hadn't really blown up to become popular music, just as one stark example, right? It was hard to get attention. It was hard to get people to pay attention. Now, fast forward to 2020, it's the cornerstone, hip hop, rap.
That's right.
Call it. They've changed the name a couple, 3 times. It used to be gangster rap, then it was rap, now it's hip hop. I think I'm keeping up. But the long and short of it is that because it's such it is the cornerstone of cultural behavior and style and language and music across the board, goes and speaks to your point about the power of music, right? And now it tears down walls, whether sometimes we want it to or not. And now all of a sudden, you know, everyone, I mean, there are labels out there that are only signing, quote, urban or black or whatever the political term is for the day, right? That's hip hop.
What about, say, just for an example, just to peel it back slightly, with that urban label, if somebody like Justin Timberlake, for example, and you look at the music that he put out as a solo artist, particularly early, was very R&B. I mean, if Justin Timberlake was a black man, would he have been urban or would he have been pop?
He would have been urban. He would have been started in an urban market because radio calls would have been easier. He would have been more accessible as a format, because pop radio, in terms of the cost to be there, to be in that space, to push through into that top 40, you are really going to have not only a story, but you've got to have the bucks to keep that promotion going and going and going and going. So why not look at your budget and go to a format that's more accessible and authentic, and that will give rise to the impetus that will make him popular. Because you got to start somewhere to be popular. Popular is the end goal. Popular is not the start. Do you remember Pink? Well, you know the artist Pink. Well, you know, she was R&B. As a matter of fact, she's a LaFace artist. She's signed by LA and Babyface. Well, she's a long way from that now. That just shows you how far you can grow.
Right.
But you started with an R&B base. That's where she came through. So it's often a matter of cost.
Yeah, no, you're very right, because pop music formats are extraordinarily expensive, and they have an extraordinary, to your point, long tail that can be very, very drawn out to get it there. And the label has to be committed.
Yeah.
Long term.
So, and that's why we like to have imports too, you know, because you take an artist like Lisa Stansfield, remember, and she'd been around the world and was #1 there too before she got to Arista. So it was great to have her there. But just to the point about the convergence of music when it comes through the hands of blue-eyed soul, let's say, like a Lisa Stansfield or Justin Timberlake. Do you know what our radio guys, I'll never forget the pop side and how angry and really almost they had a little pushback to the power of that song at Black radio. Because check this out. So, being around the world and it's a hit, it's a smash, and R&B love it. They love it like she Donna Summers, like it's brand new. I mean, like she could be that. So, at any rate, she's strong at R&B. We're sitting in the Thursday meeting with Clive Davis. Clive wants to know. He turns to his pop folks. I think it's Rick Basiglia. Remember him, Ron? And he says to him, why is this record having such a hard time getting pickup in the Midwest and basically at stations and in areas that are white? Okay. And Rick said, well, it's because there's no R&B or crossover, rhythm crossover. What was the format that was the cross between hip hop or urban, and then, you know, it was rhythm crossover. There's no rhythm crossover station in the market, Clyde, so we have no place to put it first so that it bleeds over in popularity to the other stations to get it moving, right? And Clive said, well, you know, I don't see any R&B stations in Denmark. There are no R&B stations in Switzerland. There were no R&B stations in most of the places where she was #1. Now, there weren't no even black people in the market. So in essence, he was hitting upon the residual racism that was there about this white girl singing black music, and you think it's coming over here into the pop world like that. She might as well have been black. You understand? And the fact that, and to have our own radio people say, well, maybe the next time, Clive, on the next one, we'll have one that's more, you know, more pop leaning that'll be out there. And I'll never forget Jazz Summers, her manager, saying, well, if you're not going to be the ones to carry this one, you won't be carrying the next single either, because it only gets blacker. The music only gets deeper R&B. And so we, as the black staff, we're standing there because we've carried the torch. We took her to the Apollo Theater. I wrote her bio. We are working this record, okay? It's going to the top. So, and we're quite proud of our efforts. But the fact that Jazz was willing as a white man and a white artist to stand with the R&B department and our directives of how this project should go was a real hellified statement. You know, it really was. And to watch that and to see their resentment somewhat, really, because they really felt as if he should have wanted a pop record. And he should have been willing to take their direction on the project. Let us put out the singles and determine what should be the way it goes out. Because, see, she was laid out really to be a darling at R&B radio. But it's okay because R&B radio loves her. Lisa could come back at any time with any record.
If we peel the urban label off permanently, how does that work going forward then for those artists in the US? I mean, do they just rebrand it R&B and that's fine and we just carry on like normal? Or is it, do you think, potentially going to hold them back from that crossover? Because it can't be easily categorized for your middle America white consumer.
Well, are you speaking within the industry or outside?
Well, both. Probably within the industry to start, and then how that carries on from there. You know, the ripple effect.
I don't think it makes any difference on the consumer as they listen to music. Spotify says that hip hop is the #1 format that's streaming. So that's an autonomous, ubiquitous format where you don't know who is listening to what, and they can choose whatever they want, and yet it's still hip hop on top, right? So that's just the strength of the music. I think if they want to internally keep the genre classification of R&B and hip hop, that's one thing, because that still would be diverse in terms of the executives that would be part of that, because there are a lot of people that naturally, even whether they're white, whatever, that would say, I love R&B, I love hip hop. Are you kidding? Most of the young white guys would probably still be working in the hip hop side. That's what they like. So I think the music would dictate a diverseness. So you would have that, but the title being stripped away would allow you to take command leadership from anybody, because then when you have a president that is black and he is black over the entire music company as opposed to just a division, then you won't have to have that uproar about, well, I don't have to adhere or look to somebody who has a black title. He's the vice president of black music. I don't work for black music.
Right.
So take that out, because I think it's limiting. It limits your scope as how people see you. Let's put it like this. I was just thinking about the fact that when I worked at Penthouse magazine, I worked for Bob Guccione back in the 80s, 1983, 86.
I was trying to get a job back there in the 80s.
It was the best job, one of the best I ever had, really. But there were only 3 black people that worked for the entire Penthouse company. And that's Penthouse International, Penthouse in New York, just with 3. And I was one of them, okay? Now, at Penthouse, I remember the girls that I worked with, and I am the executive assistant to the 2 vice presidents of advertising. And one of them is black and the other is Jewish. And my girlfriends there working with me said, Jackie, you really have the leadership that you could run this entire department. And I thought, wow. And they said, but you won't get it because you're black.
Wow.
And they were straight up and honest about that. And it was interesting because I had never even thought to, that wasn't an aspiration of mine to be, to be the head of that department. But it was just interesting that that's how they perceived me. But yet they also instinctively knew that would not be given because of that. And that's what I'm saying about the labels at the record company. When you have been the VP black, ... what makes people think of you in a greater sense that you could be the president of it all?
Well, you need somebody at the top, I suppose, that the only color they see is green, and it doesn't matter who the person is that's making that happen.
It reminds me of those elephants, how they say they train them and that they tie them to a chair and the elephant doesn't even know that he can pull the chair away because he's so used to being tethered that way, and it's a mind thing. And I think that's really what it does. You're tethered where really you could be and should be running the whole dang on thing. But this little title, this limiting title, is keeping you in the frame of mind that says, this is my corner of the world instead of the whole world.
Yeah, that mindset is a powerful tool that's always a challenge to be broken. Is within ourselves, right? The power of our own mind to say, hey, I'm not going to allow myself to be restricted, regardless of what the people around me, society, universe, whoever else says, whatever. And that's something that actually ought to be taught in school.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Indeed.
Ed Eckstein was probably exempt from that type of thinking because he probably felt a little privileged and gifted because I mean he is the son of Billy Eckstein. He is the godson of Quincy Jones. You know what I'm saying?
That helps.
So he's feeling like he's feeling exceptional. You don't have to worry about it.
Right. You don't have to train him to do that.
Right. That's right.
Those are some labels you can take to the bank right there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You know, the thing that's interesting about this, and I know we spent some time on it, I think it's certainly worthwhile. Again, one of the things that I'm always curious about, and you used the word, Jackie, that I love, is authenticity, right? Authentic. And I just hope that all the stuff's going on right now is authentic, because when it gets away from the core of, listen, you didn't have to change the name of the urban department now. You could have done that a year ago if that was
exactly
really, you know, in your purview, if that's what you wanted to do. I don't like those. And again, I'm not saying they did it for that reason, right? I don't know. I haven't had a conversation.
But it has the scent of it.
Yeah. I don't like those knee-jerk reactions, because if you felt like that and you want to be strong, you should have already done that. Not wait until there's a national news story and protests in the street and people upset to go, let me make a statement now. Really?
But don't you feel that? I feel that way even about the NFL when I hear that statement. I wonder, well, why didn't you at least make that statement when you signed on with Jay-Z and Steve Stout? If you were going, I mean, you really could have come back then.
But just get out there and be real, right? Because real, and just do it, right? So if you and I are going back and forth and you have a passion about something and we're going to make a change, let's just do it. Let's not wait for CNN and Fox and whoever else to tell us that there's an event we should put our name in lights. We shouldn't be doing it for that reason.
But you know, in one sense too, I guess I have to realize that everybody wasn't paying attention until they were made to be paid attention. So all of the hoopla was not for naught. There are people that needed the hoopla. You know what I'm saying? And maybe he was one of them that needed the hoopla.
You know,
fair enough. You know, the only thing I'll say, sorry, Riccardo, the only thing I'll say, because I can't help myself, Jackie, is we put out a record at Priority a few years ago by a group called NWA that set it right front and center, you know, in the 80s. That's right.
Yeah.
You know, so this is not a new message from us. We took a lot of grief from it, as you might imagine. We took remember that time in the industry. We got lots of authoritative figures in the United States.
But isn't that something in a sense that really that it was that kind of pushback when you think now, wow, it would almost seem reactionary for somebody to put out a song called Fuck the Police. Well, I guess so.
and you know what? The reason that they did it, look, you know, early days rap, honestly, was, and maybe it still is in some cases, I think that it gets studio oftentimes, but early days rap were simply stories from their experiences of the way they were living life, and they were looking for a platform to get out in front of people to tell that story, because the frustration and the anger and the unwillingness to remain in that place was so prevalent that they got out there and they put it out and they put it in front of God and country. And for quite some time, I mean, the only reason that, you know, Jerry Heller and Ruthless and Eazy-E ended up at Priorities because the majors wouldn't talk to them.
That's right. Well, Russell Simmons says the same thing about Def Jam. He said nobody would give us a deal. We had to do it ourselves. Nobody would give him a deal. He looked for one.
Right. And so we, you know, at Priority, everybody was sitting over there trying to be in the music business. And along comes this thing that Brian went down and looked and saw a big crowd in South Central, right? And saw them knowing the lyrics to every song and said, well, let's try that.
Right. All right now.
You know, because, you know, I mean, I can't speak for Brian and Mark, but I can tell you fully myself, I didn't fully understand it. I didn't fully grasp it. I didn't think it was going to be where it's at today. Maybe they were visionaries, but I'd be lying to tell you that I knew it was going to grow. I was passionate about it. I thought it was exciting, right? But the more I got into it, the more passionate I got about the community and the culture and understanding the messages in the songs and how authentic they were and how important they were. That was motivating to me. But early on, I didn't know, and I think most people didn't know, except for people that came out of the struggle, that were living in a community, that were faced with this kind of discrimination and violence and things every day. They had to say it.
Well, you know what? Whenever I had a new artist, I would first ask, who are you and who loves you? Bottom line, who are you and who loves you? Somebody loves you. And I need to know who is it that's supposed to love you. Tell me your friends. Tell me who loves you. Who would clamor for you? How they living? What they doing? Why you? So when I know who loves you and who you are, I can make it happen. I can match you up. I can put you where you need to be and how you need to be seen. And so I only like artists that have that answer a call from the community. Let's put it that way. I once watched the rabbi. I used to love watching all. This was one of my phases. See, while I'm going through all of this, I'm watching also all of those religious programs. I know them all. The Creflo Dollars, the TD Jakes, the rabbi.
Watch Morgan Freeman do that series.
So I'm listening to this rabbi, and he said, "How if you want an enterprise, a job, to create a business, you create a business based on what somebody needs. Find a need and fill it. And that to me is what music does. Find the need and fill it. For example, when Erykah Badu came, I knew she should be in my neighborhood in Fort Greene, Clinton Hill, Brooklyn, because everybody in the neighborhood looked like Erykah Badu. I said, oh my God, you're the song they've been waiting for. Because you look like them. You got this whole, Pratt is in the neighborhood, St. John College. You got to understand, this is where Spike Lee lives, okay? This is where Wesley Snipes, Terrence Blanchard lives. Everybody lives in this neighborhood like that. I mean, Donald Southern that works with Lena Horne, we've got them all, So I look, Max Roach, this is his neighborhood, honestly. So Lynette McGee, Betty Carter, all of these folks live in Fort Greene. Nelson George, the writer, everybody lives there. Wow. So you understand the vibe, you understand what it looks like, when Spike Lee did the movies, this is where the Cosby Show was shot on my block. Those brownstone, this is the vibe, okay? Then in walks Erykah Badu. I said, man, I know you. I know who loves you. Look here, that whole thing that Erykah looks like, there's a woman called Queen Afua. Queen Afua wrote a book, Know Thyself, and she's got you on the healing, the cleansing. She takes the Lion King Broadway group to the baths, and they do these spiritual baths and so forth. So this is her thing. This is the neighborhood that Erykah Badu lands in. Do you understand? So she's answering a call. You can almost see her crew. They don't know that they want her, and she doesn't know where they are, but you can see them coming together. It's really a zeitgeist in the sense that music answers what the people are crying and need for. Otherwise, ain't no need for you.
It's there to feed the soul. It's there to feed the soul, Jackie.
It's there to feed the soul. So if it doesn't do that, there's no purpose for you to just to exist as a musician if that isn't the case. So that's the type of reciprocity that I'm looking for when I see an artist. I'm like, I can see that when I met Nelly, for example, because there wasn't anybody that was rapping that was coming from this direction, from this area, and this way. And I said, oh, but I know you. He looks like Columbia, South Carolina. St. Louis, and that whole yang and that yangy sound. I'm like, wow, you sound like Carolina. I see you.
Yeah,
And
well,
he had fans. We sold 6,000 records in St. Louis alone. Okay, so we could see, wow, who are you and who loves you? You've answered both of those questions. Now all I got to do is spread that out. Take that to every market that looks like you across the world. That's it.
That's it, and that's it done. Yeah, so like I said, I mean, The Music is for the Soul and My Organic Soul is your book. It is full of quotes. If you could give us one quote now that kind of you feel expresses where you're at and where the world is at right now, what quote would that be out of your book?
Oh my goodness. All things are permissible, but not all things are beneficial. That's the Bible. And I like that one because it's known as the believer's freedom. There's a freedom in that all things are permissible, but not all things are beneficial. And that's how I judge things. I judge people and situations on that. It's all cool, but I don't have to partake in those things that are not beneficial. Let that be your restraining order. Not that, oh, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, don't. Because see, you set yourself up for failure. Everything is permissible, Rhinehart. But is it beneficial? If your mama talked to you like that, you say, nah, it's not. And really, that's kind of how my mother talked to me, in the sense that once you get to a point that you should be able to make the decisions on your own, then you're going to have to weigh this, that. Nobody's saying that you can't do it, Jack. You're out there on your own. You can be a big old freak. You can be crazy. They won't even say your mama crazy because you're crazy. You can do all those things, but is it beneficial? And that becomes my reckoning, so I can regulate myself. You did? So
yeah, I did.
That's my favorite.
It kind of sounds a bit like, Ron, that should be our podcast motto, because this podcast is permissible, but I don't know if it's beneficial.
Right. Boy, that's for sure. You know what, though, Jackie? I'm so happy you came to spend some time with us. I just love your energy. I love you. I just hope we can get you back on here again and spend more time. And honestly, I don't want to sound too nostalgic and I don't want to sound too mature, but you are exactly what the music business is about to me and why I'm passionate, because I can feel it coming through this screen, just however many miles we are away. And to be in your presence and feel that energy and that positivity. You didn't say one negative thing this whole time we've been here together. Not one. Not one. And you could have went all the way there. We could have talked about the doom and gloom and this and that and this and that. But look at that smile. Love you, Jackie.
Love you too. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie.
Nice meeting you, Riccardo. You
Lovely
seem
to
real
meet you
close
too.
to be that far away.
I'm looking forward to my book. I'm looking forward to reading your book and reading all the quotes too, man. Good luck with it.
Give me your address. I would love to send you a copy, okay?
I will. I'll put you an email.
Charge him something though, Jackie. I get a piece of the action. I'm turning down.
Ron, South Carolina got all the idiots. Is South Carolina just that strange place or what? Me and you in South Carolina.
We're going to get together while I'm down here.
Okay.
Promise you. COVID or not, I'm coming in.
Thank you, Jackie. Be safe. Stay well, and good luck with the book, man. Thank you.
Bye, Jackie. Thank you.
Bye-bye.